whenever we had a real football breakdown of the Dolphins in our conversations, it's always a bunch of other things. I can't remember the last time I went to a Mike McDaniel press conference, and I usually go every Monday, where I asked a football question.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the Buffalo Plus YouTube channel. Mike Catalana, along with Jenna Cottrell. As always, please make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Yeah, I took Jenna's line for that. It is time for us to talk a little bit about the Bills and the Dolphins. And we have a special guest, a return guest, a Mount Rushmore guest on the Buffalo Plus podcast from Miami. Reports on the Dolphins, the Heat, everything Miami. Will Manso. Will, welcome back to Buffalo Plus.
It is good to be back, and we normally are talking drama, so it's no different this time around. We try to talk some football, but the Dolphins don't really allow us to, as far as matchups go.
Let's start with the big news that they made with Chris Greer getting fired. He's been around a long time, GM for a while. They haven't made the playoffs. Should I assume that was not a surprise on your part?
No, it was not a surprise at all. It wasn't, and it was one of those things where, if anything, it was long overdue. And that's not to say that you want to see a person lose their job or that you're encouraging a guy to get fired. But I think it was pretty clear, throughout the years. And you talk about the playoffs; they haven't won a playoff game in 25 years. By the way, Chris Greer has been in the organization for 25 years, and he's the one constant. And he hasn't always been the general manager in that time, but certainly he's seen and had his fingers on what the moves that this team has done and not done over the years. And clearly it was time to go in another direction. So they started at the top. I think everybody was wondering if it would be Mike McDaniel. Stephen Ross, to his credit, finally said, no, let's start at the top with the general manager, and then we'll work our way down and figure out the rest.
I have a question, Will. Like, how deep are the issues in this franchise, in your opinion?
I mean, I think the biggest issue is this, and the biggest issue is that the owner is someone that has kind of done half measures through the years, and in the process, he hasn't allowed kind of this team to kind of develop into whatever the vision of a general manager is. And when you've got an owner who, and look, you can see the stories throughout the years where the Jim Harbaugh pursuit when he still had Tony Sparano and all the different things that, and the chases of coaches, bringing in Mike McDaniel, keeping a Mike Tannenbaum years ago and moving another guy. I mean, I can go down the list. I think the biggest issue when you ask a question like that starts at the biggest person, and that's Stephen Ross, who has found no consistency or rhyme or reason to the way he runs this franchise, and they've suffered because of it.
So you say that, and then we see Mike McDaniel staying as coach. Now, you just said about you're not sitting there rooting for anybody to lose their job, but in a sense of, does Mike McDaniel have a shot to keep this job? And is it going to be based on what they do the rest of the year? Because that would seem like a struggle.
I don't see a case where a scenario where he keeps his job, but I will say this. I mean, Stephen Ross, it wouldn't shock me if he did that. The guy that they have as the interim is a name that I think people in football circles know, Champ Kelly, who's been with a couple organizations, including the Raiders, was brought over as kind of another voice, which is just what this organization needs, right? More voices, but another voice, and now made the interim. They're going to give him a fair shot to be the general manager. And I am curious to see that if he truly does get that job and he becomes the general manager, is it a scenario where he says, hey, you're the GM, you see the way this works, I like Mike McDaniel, find a way to make it work? That would be very disappointing. And it goes back to what we said, it's not about a person losing their job. It's about, I think we've seen the job Mike McDaniel can do, and I don't think it's enough to say, hey, this guy should be attached with whoever general manager is coming in.
Yeah, because when I've watched McDaniel from afar, but even when the Bills played them, and then you hear him in the post game, honestly, Will, he sounded like a guy who was waiting to get fired.
Yeah.
I think he's at that position. Yeah, I think that's a fair assessment. And even yesterday, I sat there in the press conference and we're asking him questions, and he just looks like a guy who is just like, hey, man, I don't know what the heck is going to happen. Like, he's trying to say all the right things. I'm going to motivate my team. I've got to focus on the Bills. I can't worry about stuff I can't control. I get it. But he looked like a guy that probably sitting there that when Stephen Ross, he told the story of Stephen Ross coming in and telling about Chris Greer. I get the sense that when that door knock happened or whatever happened, that, hey, Stephen Ross is Mr. Ross is coming to see you. And he thought, all right, man, let me pack my bags. I'm out of here. So I think it's a guy that knows that he's probably on borrowed time right now, and he's just going to kind of go with the flow.
I have a question going off of that because there's just been so much turmoil, and you see like that loss to the Ravens and just on the national stage. And what is the vibe right now down there? Because it just seems like there's story after story about just dysfunction.
Yeah, the vibe right now, and it is an interesting vibe in the sense that I think the player vibe is they've seen it all, especially the veterans. Yesterday, Alec Ingold, who's a veteran, talked for a bit. We've talked to other guys as well that have been here a while. I don't think anything surprises anyone. Certainly doesn't happen in the media. I don't think you'll find a Dolphin fan who's out there that gets caught by surprise and says, "Oh, this is weird." Weird is kind of the part of what it is. I was joking with somebody yesterday. I'm a big Stranger Things fan, the TV show, and I was just finishing watching Stranger Things 4, and I'm thinking, this is year 4, Mike McDaniel. This is Stranger Things 4. Like, this is like, and if there's a Stranger Things 5 with Mike McDaniel, we got real problems. So I think the vibe is no one's surprised this is going on. I think, and it's unfortunate because we laugh, but it stinks when the team that fans support, the team that we cover, the team that's so important in this town is known for just dysfunction instead of football. I said this yesterday, Mike, and I think I'll say it to you too, is that when's the last time you and I had a real football talk? Whenever we had a real football breakdown of the Dolphins in our conversations, it's always a bunch of other things. I can't remember the last time I went to a Mike McDaniel press conference, and I usually go every Monday, where I asked a football question. It's always something else, and that's not fun. That's not the way it should be.
A guy I keep thinking about, and obviously he's a key person, is Tua. With everything that's going around him, here's the $1 million question, or more than that. What's his future? Like, is he there?
That's a $55 million question, because that's what he's guaranteed next year. I think because of the salary situation and the contract, he's going to be here one way, shape, or form next year. Whether that's a starter, whether it's a placeholder for a draft pick, whether it's somehow they find the way to move on from him, but you're still going to take an enormous cap hit. I mean, a ridiculous cap hit if that would be the case. I think that's probably the most unlikely scenario. Tua's still part of this franchise. And, yesterday, Mike McDaniel, I'm sure both of you saw it, was asked a lot about, hey, is Tua really going to get benched? Would you really consider that? And Mike gave the most, it was a kind of a typical Mike answer, but it wasn't exactly like a show of support that you would love. He was like, he's my quarterback for the Bills. He's worked hard. We put our resources in him. I'm not going to talk about stuff down that if a guy struggles that I'll do the best for the team, which is, if you ask Sean McDermott if he's going to bench Josh Allen, if you ask any, most coaches out there, if they're going to bench their starting quarterback, they're going to say no, under no circumstances outside of injury am I benching him. So clearly there's a disconnect there with McDaniel and Tua for the short and long term.
Yeah, that's fair. Now, you talk about that question. I'll ask you, in your opinion, does Tua still give the Dolphins the best chance to win?
Yeah, I think so. I think he's the most comfortable in the offense. Look, he's put up numbers. We can't sit here. Sometimes I think people are so hard on Tua. When I say people, I say mostly fans and media, that he's some terrible quarterback. He's put up some big numbers in his time in South Florida. He's had a year where he led the NFL in passing yards. He's not terrible, but I think it is safe to say he's regressed. And when you regress the way he has, you start wondering, okay, is this a person that's ever going to be back to what he was? I think it's a fair question, and the answer is I don't think so, at least not here in Miami.
So, all right, so Sunday the Bills are down in Miami. I'm going to assume it's going to be probably a pro-Bills crowd, because if I was a Dolphins fan, I think this is the time to sell your tickets. Bills fans like to make the trip. What's the vibe like for the fans? I know we've talked about this a lot, where you've said same old Dolphins, same old Dolphins.
Yeah.
Do you think there's a sense this is rock bottom, or is there another level to go? And what kind of response are they going to see in the stands on Sunday?
Well, to your point about opposing fans, look, the Baltimore game last Thursday night, there were a lot of Baltimore fans. And I know Lamar Jackson's a popular guy and he's from South Florida, and I get it. But I think more so it's just the apathy of Dolphins fans. They don't want to see a bad product. They don't want to keep paying good money to see their team get beat up, and be sort of a laughing stock, as we talked about, the dysfunction. I think the mood, though, is this. There is a certain, I guess, relief from Dolphins fans now knowing that there is change coming with a new general manager. But there's also, because it was done with just the GM and McDaniel still there, and all these reports, including NFL Network reporting McDaniel could theoretically save his job. I think there are fans out there going, is this really going to happen again? Are we really going to, because I think, Mike, I think what most fans want is just scrape this thing clean. Let's start over.
Yeah.
Bring in a new general manager. And even if that means suffering another year or two, it's suffering with the growth and understanding. Like, okay, this is the quarterback we drafted in the first round. We're going to try to build around. This is a new general manager who has a completely different vision and style than Chris Greer that we can see and give them a chance to see. So as it stands now, I think the general feeling from fans is, okay, we got change, but is it really going to be the change that we want and deserve after all the years of suffering?
Do you think with the firing of Greer that it allows for maybe some hope for fans with that? Like, I know you say there needs to be massive changes, but just having that, I mean, he was with the organization for so long, that being kind of step one. Do you think there is that little bit of hope for fans to cling on to?
I think it's step one of hope. I think the real hope will come when when Mike McDaniel's no longer the coach and when Tua is no longer the quarterback. I think fans really just want to see the slate cleaned. That's it. No attachment to the previous regime. They want to see a fresh start. And we talked about earlier, going to the top is a good start because now you're saying, okay, the guy who's put this together, who's been charged putting this together, is now no longer here. But the leftover pieces of what he created are still here. So I think fans really won't have that hope until everything, and that's probably going to be this offseason, right? Whether it's move on from McDaniel, whether it's draft a quarterback high in the first round. I think that's when the hope will come back for fans.
It's still a game for Sunday, and it's a big game. They're all big for the Bills now. They're coming off that win. They're still trying to chase the Patriots. Compete level, and I know it was against Lamar, and he was back, and Baltimore does have a talented team, but what have you seen compete level wise with this team? And for Bills fans to watch them, like, I know it's hard to, figure out, but what should they expect to see out of the Dolphins on Sunday?
Well, I mean, it depends who's left over after the trade deadline, right? And all the things that have happened in the last week or so. And this team, I hate saying the team quit because I don't think the Dolphins have quit. I think they're playing hard. I just think they're not very good. That's an issue. And when you have a team like the other day when Baltimore came to town, Lamar threw 4 touchdowns, Derrick Henry ran for over 100 yards, a team that's clearly better than them. And we could all agree Buffalo is that. When that happens and that team gets rolling, there's no turning back. The Dolphins just don't have the weapons on offense and defense. Even in a perfect world with Tyreek Hill healthy and all their pieces here, it's clear Buffalo's a better team. So now you throw in all the stuff that's happened, player injuries, mess along all the lines, offensive line, receiver. It's tough to imagine a game where, unless the Bills shoot themselves in the foot and constantly make mistakes, where this is a game. It's just not and we saw it the other day. Baltimore early on kind of kept the Dolphins in the game, right? A little bit. And it was like, oh man, it's only 14-6. And before you knew it was 28-6. And the Dolphins had no shot. And that's the kind of feel you think if Buffalo comes in and, a little Sunday early, the trip to South Florida, they start off slow. Maybe it's a 10-3. 13-7 game midway through the second, but it looks like the kind of game like that Baltimore game. The moment Josh Allen and the Bills put their foot down, there's no resistance that I can see from the Dolphins in making this much of a game.
A while ago, it was the tank for Tua, right? Wasn't that the thought? That was whatever people were saying. And then Miami ended up playing well and still ended up getting Tua at the end. Yeah. I know it's tough without a general manager there, and we have no idea. I mean, you see a lot of college football with the Canes down there. The idea of, is there somebody out there if they were looking to draft a quarterback? But the need for wins drops greatly when you're in a situation like this.
Yeah.
And the Jets just traded Sauce. Like, they're looking for that. Like, is it going to be a battle like that the rest of the way for who?
Oh, absolutely. Look, I think we all are aware of years ago, and this is the whole Brian Flores situation with Stephen Ross, and he was asked to tank and all the reports about that, all that stuff that came out. I think here in this town, certainly it's bringing back memories of that Stephen Ross has had an interim general manager who's got to listen to him, where Chris Greer was kind of his own guy because he had been here so long. I can't imagine that Stephen Ross said to Champ Kelly, hey, go out and do whatever you want. Get players, sell players. I have a feeling Stephen Ross said, hey, man, we need to rebuild. So you go out and get assets. You go out and trade guys and get picks and make sure this team, is in a rebuild mode the rest of the season. Because I think the easiest formula, we saw it, we're watching it in New England with Drake May. get your quarterback. Above all, get your quarterback first. And to do that, you're likely going to have a top 5 pick. Now, there are rare instances, sure, where guys go, look, you mentioned Lamar Jackson. He wasn't a top 5 pick. The Ravens are ecstatic to have him. Look at the Giants. Jackson Dart wasn't a top 5 pick, but they seem to be like they're happy with what they got. The Dolphins can't be in that position. They got to be in the best position possible to get the quarterback that the general manager wants for the future, and that's a top 5 pick. And to do that, they got to keep losing.
Ooh, yeah. I mean, I know I'm just curious because we talk about quarterback. I asked about Tua earlier. I know Tua was in the news with some of the comments he made and some people on Twitter, old teammates, all this stuff. What is really the leadership dynamic within the locker room? What's the sense that you get of that at this point in the season?
It's a good question because going into the season, everybody was saying with the Dolphins from within that, hey, we've got our leaders. We're changing the culture. But I'll be honest with you, it doesn't feel any different. And maybe it's because they're losing. And when you lose, everything seems bad. But I don't sense anything like I have talked to former players, including recently. I was at an event last week where a former Dolphins player said to me, I just don't think Tua is the leader that he needs to be. And that's one of those things where the quarterback doesn't have to be the raw guy leader all the time, but more often than not, you want your quarterback to be the leader, especially on a team that has deficiencies of talent in other areas. Like you can get away with sort of a quiet, mild-mannered quarterback if the team's loaded, but when you need that fiery guy and this team's got all the dysfunction, I don't know if Tua's handled it well. Actually, I do know he hasn't. He hasn't handled it well. I don't think guys rally around him. That says, I think, more about the roster composition, probably more so than Tua. But when you are the quarterback, and the interesting thing, too, is Mike McDaniel always refers to Tua as our franchise quarterback. And that started happening when Tua got his big contract. When you are the franchise quarterback and you take up so much of the salary cap, not only do you need to be a great player on the field, you need to be a leader. And I don't think right now, I think you could say with pretty certainty that Tua hasn't been that guy since he got that deal.
Last thing for me, Will, you work with the Heat. They have culture, Heat culture. Spoelstra, Riles, like, can you get them to come over and help the Dolphins? Is that up for debate at all?
I'll take it another level. Look what the Panthers have done. The Panthers have won back-to-back Stanley Cups. And the reason they have is that they had a mess for years. They were one of the most dysfunctional organizations in all of the NHL, right? They went out, they got Bill Zito, and they said to Bill Zito, hey, you figure this out. Bill Zito wasn't scared. He went out, he traded Jonathan Huberdeau, and he went out, he got Matthew Tkachuk. He got Paul Maurice, who had been through his ups and downs and a lot of wins, a lot of losses, but, was he really the right guy? He said, no, this is the right guy I want for this team, and this is the way we're going to scout and build. And now there's no question the Panthers are one of the class organizations in all of sports, but certainly in the NHL. That's what the Heat did when they got Pat Riley. The Dolphins need that guy. Now, that's easier said than done, right? Like, I don't know. Someone asked me yesterday, like, hey, who would you have this next GM of the Dolphins? And I honestly have no idea. Like, I don't know who can take this job, right, and fix 2+ decades of bad, 2+ decades of dysfunction in just like that. There is no Pat Riley out there. There is, Bill Zito. You'd love to have an executive like that can turn things around. But quite frankly, that's what the Dolphins need, a person who could lead, guide. There's no question that's the person that's at the top working the way the decision's down. And that's so much easier said than done.
Well, Will, you're going to have your hands full for a little while. This will be, it'll be something to see. You got the Heat, you got the Panthers, you got University of Miami, all that going. And then whatever happens with the Dolphins, we will see you down there in Miami. Looking forward to it. And we'll see how the game goes. As always, we thank you for being, again, he's always there, always gives the true story on what's going on with the Dolphins from Local 10 in Miami, Will Manso. Will, thanks very much for being with us. Jenna and I really enjoyed it again.
My pleasure, guys. We'll see you in South Florida.
All right. Well, that's going to do it for us. For Will Manso, our guest, and for Jenna Cottrell, I'm Mike Catalana. As always, please make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Yeah, we do that as a team. And we will see you next time on Buffalo Plus.